Good evening, Britain, and welcome to the Independent Republican Mike Graham, right here on Talk TV. It's been quite the week in the dangerous world of international journalism, and we're here to make sense of it all. But can we? How can you explain a government that promises to cut immigration for more than 13 years and then declares it will need more immigration to achieve proper economic growth? How can you explain a refusal to increase defence spending when the world is more dangerous than it's been in over 50 years? And how is it possible that local councils are finding more and more ways to tax motorists? We will attempt to answer all of these questions right here, right now. This is the Independent Republican Mike Graham. Strap yourselves in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And now, we were all expecting the Chancellor to blow us away with his fiscal firepower and deliver a beefed-up budget. Really? Instead, he stands accused by leading economists of conspiracies of silence, because Britons are facing the most difficult years since World War II. And while the Chancellor presented a rosy picture of a growing economy and lower taxation, he forgot to add most of the growth will be driven by an increase of millions in the migrant population, all the while worsening the domestic worklessness crisis. For heaven's sake, I mean, have you ever seen such a useless pile of dung running a country? I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that's about as nice as I can be. Our international editor, Isobel Oakshott, is with us, and I'm also joined by the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston. Isobel, I don't know where to start, really.
I tell you where we need to start.
Yeah, we just need to take a very large swig.
Basically how the entire nation feels at this point. We all need that.
Yeah, it's not helping.
Let's start with the whole migrant situation, shall we? Because this whole idea that growth, if there is going to be any, is going to be driven by importing yet more people seems to me completely economically illiterate. Yeah. Because thus far, growth has not been driven by the migrant population. If you actually look at how many, it would be, by the way, if we were only importing people who were very high skilled and very determined
and paying a lot of tax
and working very, very hard. But actually, when you look at the proportion of migrants that come in who are, when you take away the dependents, you take away all the, strip away all of that, it's only about a third. So we're importing a huge number of extra people in order to get some small amount of economic productivity from the minority of the overall figure.
But that's it.
So it just doesn't stack up. And equally, if you were going to do this, and this is your model for a great boom in productivity, at the very least, you've got to actually build all the infrastructure to go with it. And I didn't hear anything about that yesterday.
Well, we don't have any public money to spend, except, William, he tells us that he's going to spend more on public sector businesses. He's going to expand the government. We're going to get bigger government, not smaller government. We're going to be talking later on about defence. We've given £12 billion to Ukraine, but we haven't got enough money to give our own soldiers new boots. It's all upside down.
Yeah, I think the people that govern us don't realise how serious this is.
Yeah.
We talk about the money for Ukraine, but there's $10 billion being spent on illegal migrants also.
And that's going to go up, isn't it?
You could basically provide permanent housing for over 100,000 British people for that, and they don't do it. Now, this is a government that's completely at the end of the line. There's nothing there. I think most of them are thinking about what they're going to do after they leave government, and the thing is a shambles. But just as Isobel said on the migration issue, migration of this type is basically an addiction. It's a short-term fix. It's like the drug of debt. Yeah. It's a short-term fix to deal with a lack of labour market planning. I've said many times on this show before, Mike, that if the health service, for instance, wanted to have a labour plan, wanted to have a skills training plan, it has the resources to train every single clinician, nurse, doctor that it needs, and it chooses not to do it. It chooses not to do it because we're governed by people that are hostile to planning. Yeah.
It's also completely topsy-turvy. I mean, it's completely insane to import lots of extra people whilst allowing your own population, a significant proportion of it, to do absolutely nothing. Yeah. I mean, the figure that I find I'm sort of most exercised by is the 18 to 24-year-olds, because there's about 500,000 of those who are economically inactive and taking benefits. And I just don't
think... And who've never basically worked
You're not doing them any favours by saying, actually, we, the state, are going to look after you while you flop around doing nothing. That's not going to build them any kind of future.
These kids have got to be given a route out of it, and government's got to be part of that. You've got to, even if it's a day a week, it starts...
Is it still a kind of a sectoral problem in terms of where you are in the country? Because in some parts it's better than others.
Oh, that's true. There's a geographical spread, but it's a post-COVID thing. But, you know, there are a lot of kids are able to stay at home and the state pays for it. Get them out, compulsorily for a day a week and just get into the real world out of staying at home.
I would just have a cut-off point. Yeah. I mean, that's not very difficult. Just say, look, you've got benefits for 3 months.
Yeah.
After that, that's
they do it in
it.
America. 6 months or else you're on the streets. Now, you might say, well, unfortunately, there's a lot of people on the streets. But, you know, you can't continually, as Isobel says, subsidise laziness.
No, but the mathematics don't work. I mean, you've got 5.5 million people on out of work benefits. There's a long tail in this. I've said this before, Mike, that you know a lot of this is a consequence of deindustrialisation. In the Midlands and the North, you've got towns that have 20% of adults economically inactive. Yeah. Birmingham, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool, and this is partly a cause of just closing the factories and shipping the jobs abroad.
There's nothing for them to do.
Nothing. No, and it's partly industrial strategy. I've said before, it's very, very costly to do what they've done, to be indifferent to what we make.
Right. But this is the problem, isn't it, Isobel? I mean, all we seem to have in terms of a growth area is the public sector.
Or
because
Deliveroo,
everywhere you look,
Uber Eats or Deliveroo,
right.
you know, basically ferrying small quantities of food around for people who are too lazy to go out and get it themselves.
Right.
I mean,
and many of those,
and
also many of those people are illegal migrants. They arrested a lot of 20 Deliveroo drivers in Brighton. This was a few months back. They were all illegal migrants, every single one.
Completely. This is an absolute racket. Something that I've written about, I've talked about before. It is the whole subcontracting of accounts. So you get a legitimate person to have the account, they sub it out to an illegal migrant. Have you ever wondered why so many of them go round with their faces obscured?
Well, people that use the services a lot, because I actually don't, funnily enough, say that, you know, you've got some guy's name on the message that's coming,
different
and then some woman turns up. Completely different person.
Of course, Meanwhile, the public...
But why is this government and why are the powers that be here
it's not a government.
so seemingly useless at actually policing anything? They can't police our streets. They can't police marches. Borders. They can't police the borders. They can't police the airports. They literally can't do anything.
And I also just think the state of our streets. I mean, a lot of people, when you ask them the number one thing that they're most annoyed about, particularly in the countryside, is actually potholes.
Yeah.
But here in the city, you know, we're right in the heart of London here. I mean, just walking to work this evening, it was disgusting. You know, I just about stood in a pile of sick. There's litter everywhere, chewing gum all over the streets. I mean, it's basically third world.
And here we've got a council. I had the misfortune of having to ring my local council last week to sort a very stupid thing out. They wouldn't. I couldn't write to them. You know, they kept sending me emails saying you have to fill out this form. I couldn't fill the form out because it didn't give me the choice that I wanted to explain. And the first time I rang, I was on hold for 20 minutes. And I literally just had the music playing.
Well, they're probably at home, Mike. They're probably at home.
And when the guy finally answered, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're very busy. Can we call you back?" I'm like, "No, I need to talk to somebody."
But they're not.
But those councils, Mike, do not cut. They're not cutting back on management. Management begets management. You've got middle management is all over the place. The first thing they'll cut is working class people looking at the streets.
And I don't want to give you the wrong impression here, but the person that I eventually did talk to was foreign, right? Was not English. Now, I don't really care who's working for the council, but if there are English people not working, they should be in there. We should not be importing people to work for the council.
But frontline proper jobs, doing proper things, manual labour, always gets cut, Mike. Every single time. Did you know that there were 6,000 extra policy advisors in the whole of government since 2016?
Well,
do you think policy's any better?
No. What we do know is that Jeremy Hunt stood up there yesterday, bold as brass, and talked about needing a smaller state. This from a guy that's massively expanded the state.
But then he says he wants a smaller state, and then he announces that we're going to be spending more in the public sector for at least another 4 years. He says, you know, successive mandates from the Conservative Party since David Cameron got elected have said that they're going to reduce immigration. They said it in 2012, they said it in 2019, they said it in 2017. They keep saying
Labour will be worse.
I know it will.
But there's always this disconnect, isn't there, between what a Chancellor stands up and says in the budget, which makes everything sound as if it's hunky-dory, and then you just step back from it just for a second and just remember one word: recession.
Yes.
We're in a recession right now. So for him to stand up there and boast about growth, this year it's going to be 0.8 and next year maybe 1 point, twiddling 1 point.
And I heard you, I think, on another show either today or yesterday saying, there are other countries in the world that do not have this little tiny amount of growth.
India, 8%. China, 8, I think 8.7. UAE, just under 4. These are the kinds of figures that you're getting in countries with high productivity.
Right. Although in India, of course, they're now advertising in all sorts of different places around the internet that you can come to Britain, you can get free healthcare, and you can bring your family. All you got to do is sign up for some ridiculous course in some higher educational establishment, and they're all coming here because they know they won't have to leave.
Yeah, for sure. But and that's terrible for the balance of payments.
It's not just terrible
because
for
they can't.
It's terrible
because
for the
we,
balance of
no, it's
people.
because we
Yeah.
can't. Yeah, but ultimately that is bad for the country because we can't be bothered to train our own people until they get a training plan and a labour market plan. None of this will be sorted.
Right.
Completely incompetent.
It's completely. I can't actually believe. I don't think I've ever sat through a worse government.
I can tell
collectively.
you, I haven't. As a political journalist working since the Blair years, this is by far the worst.
Yeah.
Give me the coalition any day
Right.
under the Tories and the Lib Dems. Give me the Blair-Brown years.
Yeah.
It was a fundamental, basic level of competence.
Exactly.
I mean, they had the occasional...
I don't know about that.
there really was. I mean, there was the occasional blow-up over some illegal migrant thing. It looked tiny compared to the issues.
No, but a lot of our problems are downstream for decisions that were taken 10, 12 years ago. I'll give you a perfect example. The coalition government came in 2010. They could borrow at 1% and refused to get the state involved in any house building at all. The yield on public sector housing for rent, 3.5%. It actually cost them money not to do it. That was disgraceful, and we're paying the price.
They built no houses, and now there's about 10 million more people here.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely extraordinary. Great start to the show. Isobel, thank you very much indeed. William, thank you as well. For heaven's sake, what are we going to do? We're going to do